Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Shop Talk episode of FP Next, powered by John Deere. But this is not just any Shop Talk episode, because of course, we are live from Husker Harvest Days in Grand Island, Nebraska. I'm one of your co-hosts, Sarah McNaughton Peterson, and I'm here with Kurt Arns.
Yeah, hi Sarah. Yes, we're live here at Husker Harvest Days. We've been doing this the last couple of years, so we're really excited to have a good discussion today with our tech guru. That's what we like to call him. So it'll be a lot of fun. So we hope you hang around and listen in and kind of pick up on some of the technology going on here today at Husker Harvest Days.
Absolutely, and as always, it's a beautiful day here in Huskerland, and we're seeing a lot of excitement around the showgrounds already on this first morning. And of course, we are not alone because today we have the hot commodity of the Farm Progress team with us, Andy Castillo, who is our tech and equipment editor. And if you want to talk about the latest and greatest in tech, Andy is the one to do it.
Yeah, welcome, Andy, and welcome to Husker Harvest Days, to FP Next again. We visited with you last year about some of these same topics, so we're kind of excited to dig into a new year on this. So we're going to ask you first off to tell a little bit about how you came to Farm Progress and kind of your role with Farm Progress and some of the things you do.
Thanks for having me. Test. Thanks for having me. It's nice to be back. And guru is a bit flattering, not just because I'm constantly learning, but also just because tech is evolving so fast that there's not one person in the world that can be the one source. Because tomorrow there might be something that's completely new that I don't know anything about.
Isn't that all of us?
That's true. I mean, we're all on a constant journey of learning, right?
Well, tell us a little bit about your role at Farm Progress, kind of your journey to the Farm Progress team, and kind of how your last year has been. So.
Do you want the long version or the short version?
Sure, we're here.
Okay, so my journey into ag journalism has been long and winding, and it began when I was in the military. I was a firefighter in the Air Force, and I was on the deployment. And I found myself taking photographs more than maybe I should have been. And the sergeant pulled me aside, and he was like, Andy, maybe you should do something that's related to creativity, because that was really where my passion was. And it was the best advice anyone ever gave me. So I came back, I switched my major from building construction into English, and then soon after that, I got a job at a local television station where I was a camera person, and then I became a producer, and then I got into local newspapering. So I wrote for a local newspaper for about a decade. I got a creative writing master's along the way, and then around that time I got married too. And my wife is a travel nurse, and so on our first date, we were thinking about how we might be able to take our life remote. Literally, we were over sushi. We said, okay, how are we going to do this? and then eventually, 2 weeks after that first date, she went back to school for nursing, and she got a second degree in nursing. And then I started working to be able to take my life on the road, and I got into ag journalism because of that, because we here at Farm Progress are all remote. But it's not my first foray into ag. When I was at the local newspapers, I was covering a lot of agriculture. So I understand it. I don't have an ag background specifically, but in some ways, I think that kind of plays to my benefit a little bit, because technology that we're seeing emerge suddenly into farming has its roots elsewhere. So the technologies that we're talking about today are also applicable in so many other industries, from manufacturing to healthcare, cities, municipalities. I mean, the undergirding infrastructure, such as Amazon Web Services, are prevalent throughout your cell phone that you're holding right now. So it's all the same technology, it's just specific ag applications. And that's one of the things that I find so interesting about it.
Absolutely, and of course, the Farm Progress Show was just a few weeks ago in Decatur, Illinois. What was the tech scene like there? So many new products, so much cool tech. Tell us a little bit about it.
I will say, I think compared to last year when the farm economy was really booming, we saw a lot less products than last year. I think, just that's the way the cyclical cycle works. But some really notable emerging products that I thought were really interesting. There was 2 new automation machinery tractors on the scene. One of them is from Carbon Robotics, which is a Western California brand that is for the first time making a foray into Midwestern crops, which I found was pretty interesting. So basically, they greenhoused this technology in specialty crops. They got it to a point where it works well, and now they're moving their entire lineup. And it's not just the automated tractor, which they just released this year, but they also have this laser weeder that I thought was pretty neat. It's basically a massive implement. It's quite expensive, but it zaps the weeds, which is innovative. It's cool, and that might be the future. And then the other one is Agra Spray Drones. Just released a new Autonomy kit as well. When you say Agra spray drones, maybe you don't think that they're in automation, but they are doing that. And again, that goes back to the same technology with different applications. The same things that are flying the drones are also driving the tractors.
When I was out on a field in Nebraska this spring, and there were little robot weeders going up and down soybean fields. It's an organic field.
Greenfield robotics.
Yes, and it was a lot of foxtail in this field, and so they really had to work. These were not laser. They had cutters in front, but they were on tracks, so they wouldn't tip over in a pivot track, that kind of thing. But that was kind of crazy, and it was like Star Trek kind of stuff, because 20 years ago you would have never dreamed that anything like that would happen. So, but the big concern with all that is always, does it pay for itself? Do you have the ROI on it? And it's fun to see the demonstrations out in the field, but certainly farmers are looking at ways to try and pay the bills. So I had a question. So how are you seeing farmers react to some new tech like this stuff and implementing in their own operations? And then how do they pick where to start, with some of this new stuff that's coming down the line like that?
First of all, I just want to comment on those robots, because there's something out of Wall-E if you've never seen them, or a Disney Pixar movie. They're really cute, they're adorable, but they're also packed with technology. And there's kind of two schools of thought that I've deduced from talking to a lot of different machinery experts about basically where this automation's going, right? On the one hand, you have these massive machines that are getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and then you have this thought that maybe it's going to be swarms. Maybe we're going to release a dozen of these tiny little modular robots into the field to do the work of one tractor. So those are the kind of two schools of thoughts, and the same applies to drones. Like some people think that maybe there's going to be 20 drones flying over fields in the future. But in terms of the ROI, from what I've heard, and I've talked to a number of farmers about this, it's too expensive right now. I mean, automation, the price per acre, it doesn't really make sense unless you're wanting to get some of your time back. That's kind of the biggest driver at this point, is that maybe people want to be able to, go to weddings. Maybe they want to run a tillage machine overnight, say if the planting windows are tight. But I think that when it's really going to take off, and you're seeing this with drones right now that prices have come down a bit, when it's going to take off, I think, is when the price per acre maybe becomes comparable to what you'd be paying somebody to drive the machine. Until then, I don't really know if it makes a lot of sense from an ROI perspective. And everybody's different. Everybody's operation is different. What might make sense to one person won't make sense to another.
That's just the name of the game in ag, is it depends on what farm you're on and who you're talking to of what they're going to do. But we're going to come back to the automation discussion a little bit later in this episode. But one thing we have to talk about over here at Husker Harvest Days is irrigation and cattle are the name of the game here. And of course, as a cattle person, I've seen some pretty cool cattle products already this morning that we'll maybe touch on a little bit. But let's talk about irrigation. What are you seeing in terms of new irrigation tech, hitting on that ROI, hitting on inputs? What are you seeing?
It's funny that you said that, because I just came from a farmer, Daryl Hunnicutt. He lives about 25 minutes away from here. And he had this really innovative piece of technology on his center pivot. It's called Autonomous Pivot, an Israeli brand. Never heard of it before. But he's been testing their technology for, I think, a number of years. But basically, if you can picture it, it looks like this giant probe that's hanging off of the pivot, and it's permanently mounted there. And as it goes over the field, it takes all kinds of sensors, or data readings, like moisture content, things like that. And then there's also cameras that are on it, so it's constantly taking pictures. He didn't exactly know what they're going to be using those pictures for, but I suspect that they're probably going to be pairing AI with that to be able to better understand crop health, maybe forward advance warning of disease pressure, things like that. But I think it's really interesting because they're using the machines that are already out in the field. I mean, pivots are always there, right? A tractor passes through. A sensor can only, if you plant it in place, it only gets one spot. But why not put it on something that's moving to get a better picture of your entire field?
If you think about it, the pivot was really one of the first autonomous machines. You know, it was invented in the 50s, basically, and here in Nebraska. And we're just finding out new ways to use the pivot all season long. And things like, I know a lot of the irrigators are really anxious to get like the diagnosis stuff. So like if you have a fault or you have a flat tire or something like that going on, you know, they want technology to tell them which tower is having the problems and even to be able to maybe to reverse the machine, you know, from their phone, which is a big deal. But you're talking about something that's actually going to diagnose crop problems, which is another thing that we can do since we have that autonomous machine out there. You're right.
And certainly, I mean, there's so many of those products on the market. What you were
Yes.
just mentioning, like there's one that identifies if it's not going in the right circumference, and it can pinpoint exactly which
Right.
tower is the problem tower. It saves you a lot of time,
A lot of
a lot of effort slogging through those fields.
Yeah, and you know, we talk about the pivots, but we could also talk a lot about drones, and it's something that you would not have seen anywhere maybe 10 or 12 years ago were as many drones, especially on the spraying side. And now, if you walk through the streets here at Husker, you're going to see drone carts, you know, so you've got these big trailers, and man, some of them are really decked out, nice chairs, they have like an office on them. I mean, that's something you would not have seen.
I saw one at Farm Progress that has an air-conditioned office in it.
See, there
which
you
is
go.
Pretty
So we're
wild.
trying to make it a lot easier and more comfortable to be out there. So what do you see, like, what's next on the drone side as far as the tech side?
Well, first of all, it's booming. I talked with I visited a Minnesota drone operator this year, which, quick side story, his name is Alex Peterson, and he was a Red Bull wingsuit jumper. And he was a professional paraglider that did the global circuit and competed internationally. And now he has a young daughter, and he was basically saying, I don't want to take this risk anymore. So he used to fly drones, behind him as he's careening down the mountainside. And he's taking those skills and he's applying them to ag drones. And that's another thing I've noticed. You have all of these disparate, disconnected skills that people are developing, like flying drones, and suddenly you're able to apply them on farm fields, which is fascinating. So you're getting this inpouring of non-ag people, like myself, suddenly into the space, which is disrupting for sure, but I think it also infuses it with maybe some new ideas, some new ways of looking at problems, solutions perhaps that you can't think about if you're in it, and maybe it's just you don't know about it because it's been incubated in another space. But in terms of where drones are going, when you asked that question, I thought about this one particular drone that I saw at the Farm Progress Show by Kelly Hills. And when I tell you, ag spray drone, what do you think? What's the first image that comes into your mind?
I feel like it's one of those like giant drones you see at field days is like the first thing that pops into my mind.
So this one looked nothing like what you're thinking about. It was like one of those strike drones. It was incredible. I mean, massive. It was not, like a helicopter. It was, it looked like something like a surveillance drone or something by Kelly Hills, a prototype that was being launched. So there's some people out there that are doing really innovative, cool things that, I don't know where the future is going to go, but that's part of the exciting part about it.
You don't have a crystal ball where you just know what's coming next?
I do know that it's advancing very quickly. So that Minnesota drone operator that I visited with, when I went there, he was about a year into his transition. He had 2 drones. Now he has 8. So within the span of 6 months, 3 months? I mean, that's how fast this field is expanding, very, very rapidly.
I attended an ag drone conference recently in northeast Nebraska, and one of the things another thing related to drones that you would not be talking about is they're doing research on, like, if you have a drone strike on an aircraft. So this was about drone safety, because there's more and more in the air. You know, they are regulated, but obviously, you know, safety gets to be an issue. And they were talking about, you know, trying to keep drones out of the aircraft airspace. And so these are all, you know, things that a decade or two ago we would not have been talking about.
It's, you know, it's not just physically too. I mean, I don't know if you remember a few years ago when 5G was being announced, when there was this whole concern about the 5G signals interfering with aircraft, so that the connections that fly these drones are they go on a certain frequency, and there's a lot of concern about that, about interference as these you know, machines become more complex, as there's more of them out in the field. I mean, wires could be crossed, right? So it's complex, and there's a lot of people a lot smarter than I am that are working on this stuff.
I think it's always so interesting. And of course, while we're on the subject of drones, we've got something new here at Husker that we haven't before, and you got to see at the Farm Progress Show. But that's, of course, like the drone zone. And you kind of touched a little bit about like what you're hearing from farmers on utilizing drones. But I think maybe what I always, and maybe it's just me, what I always think of when it's drones is like those targeted applications, more like the precision agriculture side of drones. Have you seen that grow, or do you think it's more of like the AI utilization for drones?
I've talked to a lot of farmers that are interested in getting into it, if they aren't already. But I mean, I think there's sort of this understanding that it's not as complicated as maybe it seems at first. There's certainly an initial learning curve that I think is fairly steep, but once you understand the process of it, I mean, it's not unlike what you're doing now, except that, you know, you're not driving something, you're just filling it up when it comes back and then pressing a button and then it goes out. Switching batteries, filling tanks, like that's really the bulk of the work. So I think people can do it. It just takes a leap. So there's certainly interest, and it'll be interesting to see how fast it expands in the future.
So we talk a lot about what's coming up in technology, but we forget that, you know, at one time the moldboard plow was new technology, right? So, you know, a new harness, when in the horse-drawn days, that was new technology, so it was new stuff. So you did a cool story, I think it came out of Farm Progress Show, about a farmer who was farming with his 1970s tractors. Now that could be me, because one of my main tractors is 1960, right? So it's a 560. But if you could tell us a little bit about that story that you did out of Farm Progress Show, it was very good. You
know, history is cyclical, and a while back I wrote a column about basically when you mentioned the wooden plow. When the first person that invented the single cast iron plow was testing it out, his idea was ridiculed. I mean, you know, like we think today that we're unique, maybe because you see something that's really innovative out there and you say, oh, that's never going to happen. It does. I mean, history happens very quickly, but you know, it builds on each other. It builds on itself, right? So that 1970s TR-70 that I wrote about, I mean, the guts of that machine, the twin rotor technology that New Holland had, eventually, you know, evolved into what we have today. So it all builds on itself. And what's nice about those older machines is that they're simple to run. There's not technology that's embedded in them. They're very reliable. And speaking of that older technology, there's a 90-year-old former farmer named Mike Polasic over in the historic antique tractor area, and he's got 3 Kruger Atlas engines running that I just thought was really interesting. I popped over and I talked to him for a while, and he farmed for about 45 years, and now he just, you know, restores these engines. But when I asked him, you know, like, why are you interested in this? Why do you want to do it? He just said because they're simple, you know, like he understands them, and I think that's ironically where we're kind of getting with technology. Like we've gone on this long roundabout path, and with the emergence of AI, things like this, suddenly simplicity is being injected back into our processes. Now you can press a button, and those drones just go up and fly.
Well, I think it's an interesting conversation. We were chatting a little bit. Of course, we all travel to Husker Harvest Days, and a lot of us have rental cars. And I have a 2025 rental car sitting out in the parking lot. And when I was driving through South Dakota from North Dakota, those little lane assists were freaking out because it was in a construction zone and there was no painted lanes. And the car didn't know what to do and I was trying to figure out to turn it off while I was doing, but it's almost like there's so much technology in all these vehicles that sometimes you just want to go from point A to point B. Yeah. But talking on that tractor, Kurt and I have had an episode earlier this year. We visited with John Deere talking about retrofitting new tech into kind of those older pieces of equipment, because if it's not broke, don't fix it. You can just update it a little bit. What have you kind of seen about people either choosing new technology or people choosing to retrofit, or are they just sticking with old reliable?
I think a lot of people are retrofitting right now. I mean, just given the market and the finances, it makes more sense to put new technology onto older equipment. And I think most of the OEMs are recognizing that and pivoting in that direction. And why not? I mean, right? Like the iron lasts. There's nothing wrong with it, right? Why not just retrofit it, put something new on it? And when it comes to ROI, I think that's kind of hard to quantify. Some people do it because they see an immediate return on investment. I think there's some tried and true technologies, like everybody I talk to says auto steer, but that's been around for 30 years and people are still talking about it. But also like planting technology, I think is kind of a no-brainer at this point. And personally, I think drones are going to get there. I think we're eventually going to come to a point where it's like, well, why wouldn't you?
Drones are just the new auto steer. 10 years, 15 years down the line, it sounds like, right?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I think in a couple decades, like, you're not going to be able to go to a farm and you not see a drone. They're going to be everywhere. I mean, even today, people are using them for scouting. Like, you'd be hard-pressed to find a farmer that doesn't have a drone for scouting. I think spray drones are going to be the same.
Going back to something you talked about before, about how maybe we're maxed out on some of the size of some of our equipment, and maybe it's going to be smaller, like robotics. And it goes back to what I saw in the field, this spring. And it's funny because I talked with Roger Hoy, who's the retired director of the Nebraska Tractor Test in Lincoln. And this has been 3 or 4 years ago. I kind of credit him with being a little bit of a prophet, because that's exactly what he was talking about is, drone swarms, smaller robots, a whole bunch of them working out in the field. And it helps on the labor side, which is always short on the farm. But also, I keep thinking, though, the technology has to come along, so these are really easy to service and really tough in our crazy weather and that kind of thing too, right?
I think the nice thing about those smaller machines is that you can make them modular. So, if you have some component that breaks, you can just swap it out. And I mean, if you think about in terms of like, what happens if your transmission goes, or you have something wrong with your concaves, or that's a big fix, right? But like if you have a faulty robot that's one of 12, like, you can just go out, pop out the thing, and put it back. So I think there's advantages from that, and also the scalability of it. I mean, I think that's an interesting part about it. Like, say you buy more acres of land, instead of having to go out and buy a brand new machine, just get another robot, and like vice versa. If you get rid of land, sell the robot. Like, I think it's maybe easier to play around with from like a margin standpoint. You have more control over your machines, but that's just me. I mean, other people don't agree. As I said, there's two trains of thought here that I've seen.
Absolutely. I know we kind of touched on this a little bit, and this is like the $1 million question, right? Is the ROI, and is it going to work out? Is it going to balance out at the end of the year? All this new technology, all this new equipment with labor issues and crop inputs and like everything we could talk about that's costing farmers more money while they're making less. And I mean, we're not economists. We don't want to talk about the crop markets here today. But how are you seeing farmers react to this new tech, and like, how are they balancing the ROI and like figuring it out if it's really worth it on their operations?
I think it has to work. I mean, that's kind of where we've gotten, right? Like, the margins have become so slim. It feels like we're constantly walking on a tightrope, and the aging of farmers is a real issue. Like, I just talked with a farmer yesterday, and he said when he goes to his regional meetings, there's like 15 people that are below 40 out of 50. I mean, that's a problem. Like, what's going to happen when people start retiring, when farmland consolidates? I mean, it's an issue. And you have less and less people that are wanting to go into farming. Technology has to be the answer. I mean, that's really like, I think that's the only way. So in terms of ROI, I mean, I think the price is going to have to come down. But It's going to. I mean, it's going to as we advance more, as these technologies become more embedded. Believe it or not, I remember a day when I didn't have a smartphone. I know I'm young, but things are moving so quickly. And now they're just commonplace. They're everywhere. You can't get away from it. So eventually, I think it's just going to become so embedded in everything we do, every touch point of ag. And this farmer that I went to yesterday that I just mentioned, Daryl, what I found was really interesting about his operation is that literally every touch point has some sort of innovative piece of technology, whether it's the panels that he uses for his pivots, like the technology that he's embedded into his planters. He has a grain weevil in his bin, like everything has some sort of piece of technology to either make his life safer or make it easier.
I think that grain weevil was developed here in Nebraska,
Yes,
wasn't it?
yeah, it was by a Nebraska student actually who worked with his dad to kind of develop the idea, and the whole thing is to keep people out of the bin. So it's a safety issue, as much as it is anything.
They actually tested it at his farm, which was really interesting. He was talking a little bit about that process, but I guess they're working on making that automated, which is interesting because it's only remote control at this point. But that's going to be a big breakthrough when it is automated.
Yeah, you remember your first smartphone. I remember dial-up CB radios and bag phones. So, right? I mean, that was technology in my life.
At the Farm Progress Show, I serendipitously ran into this 95-year-old engineer from CAT. And he was integral in developing the motor grader technology, the very first motor grader to the present. And it was just fascinating talking to him and thinking about the breadth of advancement that he's experienced in his lifetime. I mean, he went from 20-something horsepower engines to 700 plus, almost 800, maybe over 800. It's wild. And if you think about, like what's going to happen in 50 years, I mean, with the advancements moving so quickly now, it's exciting. I'm excited about it.
I've probably told this story before, but one of my neighbors is 97, and so he grew up farming with horses, and now he has his smartphone and can turn his pivot on, right, with his smartphone. So he's like, just think about that, in the century of his lifespan. It's hard to even imagine what the future could actually hold.
I always tell my wife I want to live to 100, and that's true. I want to see, where we are approaching the turn of the century. It maybe when I get to 100, technology will have advanced enough that I can live to 150. Who knows? We'll see.
It's always a guessing game when it comes to that, and that's what me and Kurt make. If you've listened to our podcast, we make the crystal ball joke, maybe a few too many times, but it's always interesting. And we talked a little bit about this earlier, just today, but last year I saw this really cool piece of technology, which is an autonomous feed truck, and it's got 360-degree cameras. And talk about the labor and getting out there and feeding those cattle. I thought that was the coolest thing because, of course, we've seen the self-driving tractors. But that was the first time I had seen the autonomous feed truck, and I was so stoked about it. But, autonomy isn't something that's really going away. Are farmers embracing it? Are they hesitant? What are they kind of feeling like from your perspective?
I think it's still too new to really be embracing, but it's not it's not just in row crops, it's not just in cattle. There's a piece that I think was developed in Lincoln, maybe just outside Lincoln, but it's an autonomous robot that goes into hog pens, and it basically gets them up and moving, keeps them healthy. So there's so many different applications to this. And I think we're probably going to see more in the future. Like it starts with the tractor because that's the obvious point. But I think, I envision a day where you push a button and your farm is automated. I don't know. Maybe I'll see it in 100 years.
Most people are comfortable talking about technology on the crop side, but I mean, just like the feed truck, monitoring waterers remotely, that kind of thing. I mean, on the livestock side, technology is also a very big deal. There's no question about it. Well, Andy, as we kind of start to wrap things up for this episode, I think you did a recent story on some farmland loss, and I know that's something that maybe you're a little passionate about. So if you wanted to share with us just a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I spent a number of days in Ohio, around the Columbus area, which is really facing the most pressure. Well, maybe not the most pressure, but Ohio is experiencing a huge boom of data center development, which is, again, pushed by this technology. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in a way. But to put this into perspective, the Cleveland County has lost, I might be wrong, but I think I'm right, 60% of its farmland in the last couple decades. And what's unique, and I think farmers need to take note about, is that for so long, ag land has been valued exclusively for agricultural production. And now suddenly with these technologies, there's desire by outside industries. So solar, right, wants expansive, wide open, cheap land that's close to transmission lines. Farmland is that land. It's much cheaper for them. You know, I hear all the time from farmers, oh, just put them on top of the rooftops, but it's so much more complicated than that. First of all, you need funding, and funding for that kind of stuff is being very slashed. So the obvious answer is to turn to farmland, which is inexpensive, close to transmission lines. So that's one industry that wants the land. And then the other one is data centers. Data centers need massive amounts of water. And what regions of the United States have water, right? So, and land is cheap. They can go out and buy land that's close proximity to water. And the Midwest is desirable, again, because it's kind of the center point of the country. I mean, they don't need to be close to the coasts, right? So suddenly, I think, maybe not suddenly, but this has been a growing, building problem, but I think it's becoming much more of a problem as these federal initiatives that are pushing things like AI development, which is important in so many different ways. But I don't really know if it's taking into account the long-term impact on farmland. So I do think that's an issue that we all need to pay closer attention to, that our lawmakers need to pay closer attention to. So thank you for highlighting that and asking me about it.
I think an interesting discussion on the farmland loss and the AI data centers and the data centers in general is up in good old North Dakota, where I'm from, of course, right? There's a family trying to put in some dairy operations. They're meeting a lot of opposition, but in that same county, there is a brand spanking new AI data center going in that has had zero opposition. And I think it's so interesting to kind of see the differences between the cattle farms and the AI data centers, but everyone's kind of got their own opinion on AI a little bit here too, right? And I know there's so many applications, kind of like automation for AI in agriculture. Which between automation and AI do you think is more accepted right now from your farmers you visit with?
I think they're intricately connected. You can't pull them apart. And I mean, to answer your question, money's the reason. I mean, Intel's building a new development in just outside Columbus, where I was reporting on, $28 billion. I mean, what state is going to turn down that kind of investment? Compared to a farmer on 1,000 acres of land that's producing enough to barely scrape by, of course they're going to take the Intel plant every single time. But in terms of which is being accepted, I mean, their technology at this point is so interwoven that you can't really talk about automation without talking about AI, because the things that are driving the automation is AI. And we think about AI maybe as being like a chat GPT kind of thing, but chatbots are just one part of the field. Machine learning is kind of another component. And those are the things that basically ingest the data that we pull through telematics, make sense of it in a flash, make these decisions that in a lot of cases are better than we humans could make, and implement them in real time. So they're interwoven. So I think if you say, which is being accepted, I mean, I don't think there's a lot of understanding about it, but I think they're definitely going to be more accepted in the future. And that's why you're talking about your rental car. Mine has the same, the lane assist, right? I think these companies are gradually introducing it to us, because we need to learn to trust it and learn that it can make decisions. And maybe it will make decisions on an unmarked lane, but maybe next year it might.
Who knows? It's always changing, right? And that's what I think is so interesting. I know in another one of our episodes, Kurt, we talked a little bit about AI and automation, and we made quite a few jokes about that movie iRobot, and making sure we say please and thank you to AI. But I think there's so many applications and so many ways that farmers can benefit from automation and AI and really try to help make their lives easier, especially with less maybe in the next generation wanting to come in and help out, and less labor availability. Like, technology is kind of going to be the thing that like plugs the hole for agriculture, it seems like.
And in my life too. So previous to this, as you both understand from covering these Husker Harvest Days, every year we go to every single booth here at the show, and we ask about new product information. And before, I used to have to carry around this notebook that, 5 years ago, I used to have boxes of these inside of my basement collecting dust, and I would take notes, and then they would go in there, and I would never do anything with them. But now we're using AI to aggregate that information. So instead of taking notebooks, we're walking around and recording, the product developer speaking right into it. And then we're taking that recording, we're transcribing it, we're dumping that transcription right into AI, and it's giving us a product description in a blink. So AI is incredibly powerful. And to repeat some I think wise advice that I've heard from farmers before, AI is only as powerful as the person using it. And I think we need to leverage that. And the people that embrace the technology are the ones that are going to survive it. So that's what I'm trying to do in my own career. Embrace technology as it comes along, and I think it would behoove all farmers everywhere to do the same.
So far, we've found quite a few new products at Husker Harvest Days. Not all AI, but a lot of different technologies, and vendors from the big vendors to very small ones. And as you go around, like you say, our big team goes all around, visits every booth here at Husker. What are you kind of looking for? I mean, what are the types of questions that you ask about new products coming forward? Because so far, Sarah has found quite a few this morning. That, even though the farm economy is not great, unless you're a beef producer, still there's a lot of new products here on the show site today.
As a tech nerd, I mean, I really want to know how it works, so I tend to ask questions along that. But I think the big question is it actually useful? And I mentioned so many other, outside companies, developers suddenly emerging into the ag space. And I think there's a lot of products out there that maybe aren't so useful. People that develop a product without realizing that and then look for a solution after the fact, rather than, thinking about a problem and then working back from that. So application is a big one. How is this actually useful? What can this actually do? And then parsing out, is there actually data to support this? Like, things are just so new, they're coming onto the scene so fast that, I don't know. You don't know. And you're not going to put out $100,000 for an unproven piece of technology. Like, that just doesn't make any sense.
Absolutely. I know over in the Beef Showcase building last year, there was a student, and he had solved the problem that him and his family had on the ranch of automating a step of their cattle treatments. And so he's like, we don't have enough hands to do all of these things, so I automated a part of the process. And that's what I think is so interesting about shows like this, is you have the producers, the farmers, the ranchers who are like, I solved my own problem, and kind of came up with that solution. They didn't try to make the solution to fit a problem. They had the problem and they found the solution. That's one of my favorite parts about finding all the new products at Husker Harvest Days.
I'm excited about the next generation that's coming up into this technology. And maybe they might otherwise leave the farm, but because they can apply their passion for technology or maybe something else to real world problems, I mean, that's like the best of both worlds, right? And who doesn't want to innovate something and then immediately see the impact of their innovation in a real world situation? It's not just theoretical in agriculture, which I think is really interesting. It's practical.
Absolutely. And I know we could sit up here and chat about new products and everything for this entire afternoon for you guys, but we are going to start wrapping it up here. And of course, we want to say that all of the links for all of our new products that we found will go out on Farm Progress websites after this. If you want to find the recording of this, in case you wanted to hear us again, if you're sitting here live, you can find that. But that's going to wrap up our super special Shop Talk episode of FP Next, live from Husker Harvest Days. And the good news is there are still 2 more days of this great show. And so if we talked about something that piqued your interest, head on out there and find some of those developers and some of those companies who are solving our problems.
And if you want to find some tractor ASMR, go over to the antique tractor area and talk to Mike and check out his ancient engines. I think they're from the early 1900s, and he spent, He said he spent 4 months on his back in a farm field trying to get the pistons loose. So definitely check it out.
It's one of the great things. You can see the very early technology, and then you can see the latest and greatest, right here on the showgrounds, all in one spot. So as we wrap up, to our listeners, we want to thank you for tuning in to this episode of FP Next, allowing us into your tractor cab, your truck, on your farm, in your shop, and in your fields. A special thank you goes out to Andy for joining us today, and also to our sales, digital, production, and marketing team members who put in a lot of work with us every time that we have an episode. If you want to be sure not to miss any top stories, sign up for the Farm Progress Text Blasts, which bring the hot stories right to your inbox.
Talking about these supercomputers we get to carry around in our pockets now, I remember a time when you had to learn how to do math without a calculator because they said you'd never be able to carry a calculator around with you. But not only are you going to be able to see hot stories right to your inbox, the Husker Harvest Days app gives a lot of great information. I know I got a push alert to make sure I came to show up for our live podcast recording. There's a lot of great stuff on the Husker Harvest Days app if you haven't downloaded that already. And if you haven't signed up for the text alerts for top stories like our podcast and other things Andy and ourselves put out, text FARM, F-A-R-M, to 20505 to sign up for those. Follow Farm Progress on social media to stay up to date with ag news and more, especially during Husker Harvest Days. And make sure you check out the digital edition of your regional publications at farmprogress.com. We'll be back next week with another From the Field episode of FP Next. We're actually going to have the Husker Harvest Days farm manager, Jason Libby, talking about what farm conditions and crop conditions have looked like this growing season.
Yep, Jason's pretty tied up right now out at the corn harvest demonstrations, and he's pretty busy, but we're going to try and catch him for a great From the Field episode right here from Husker Harvest Days.
Absolutely. I'm excited to get out there and see what some of those crops look like. We've been talking about them with our events manager. I've heard so much about the show crops, and I need to get out there and take a look at them. And of course, any of those links for the stories like the 1970s tractor and our new products, those will all be in the episode description online. And you can follow along with FP Next by listening and subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. And we're on YouTube. And we're on Farm Progress Online. So you really can find us anywhere. And as always, now you guys are here live. And so if you want to chat with us after we're done recording, we'd love to visit with you. If you're listening to this after it's been released, please email us and let us know what you think. And if you have a couple minutes, leave us a review.
Sarah always says 5 stars or nothing.
Absolutely. And remember, if it's agriculture, your friends at Farm Progress have you covered. Here's wishing you high yields and good weather. We'll see you next time. And for all of you guys in the tent, don't go anywhere. I see some people standing up. There's more cool stuff going on this afternoon on the Husker stage, so make sure you stick around for that.